It's 4:30, so we should probably start.
Yeah.
My name is Ben Nelson. I'm the founder of Minerva.
Hi. My name is Manuel Dolderer. I'm the co-founder of Code University here in Berlin.
We thought we would perhaps give a little bit of context about what it is that we do, and then try to engage in discussion and conversation. Yeah. So, Manuel, you want to give a kind of a quick overview, and I'll follow suit?
Yeah, I'd like to. Just so you know, we will have a mic, so for any question or kind of discussion you would like to participate in, you can ask for a microphone. Well, I would just like to start and give you an idea, referring to the title of this session, the why, how, and what of higher education. Why we thought it would be worth the effort to actually found another private university in Germany. I mean, for those of you who don't know, we have around 105 private universities in Germany, in addition to about 300 state universities and universities of applied sciences. So it's basically, you don't need just another university. So for us, there were exactly two reasons why we thought we wanted to create another private university of applied sciences in Germany. The one thing was the focus on digital product development. So this idea that we need something next to computer science or informatic in Germany that is more more hands-on, more related to what's actually happening in e-commerce companies, in software companies, in terms of digital product development. So basically what business schools are for normal economic study programs, if you will. That was the first idea. And the second idea was that we as a founding team were deeply convinced that the way students learn today in traditional higher educational institutions is a huge waste of resources. I mean, if you look at the way we naturally learn as children, we learn basically all the time curiosity-driven. So we're curious about something, we're interested in something, and we want to understand it. We want to learn it, we want to be able to do it. And that's how we learn to talk, to walk, how to use a spoon, tie your shoelaces. Everything we're learning out of curiosity until the day we enter school. And then it stops. And then basically nobody asks you anymore, what are you interested in? Because there's a curriculum and there are experts and teachers, and basically for every day of your school life, and it continues into the university, there is someone telling you when to learn and what to learn. And that's what we were trying to change. So from a very curriculum and teacher and professor-centered approach to a student-centered approach. What would it mean for a higher education institution to create a learning environment where the curiosity of the student is the driving force behind learning, and not the fact that a professor thinks a student has to learn something and then comes with a test and tries to find out if the student has actually learned it. Because when you look at the knowledge students gather to pass a test, this knowledge usually disappears after the test is done, because that was the reason for learning it. And so we were thinking, as I said, of a learning concept that would enable students to follow their own curiosity, their own interest, a student-centered and student-driven learning approach. And what we came up with was basically students are working in projects, in teams. And these projects are created together with corporate partners and startups and experts from outside the university to make sure that they are related to the real world, to something that's happening out there in terms of technologies and developments. And then we create, together with these partners, we create projects, and the students can look at the different projects and decide which project they find interesting and which project they want to be part of and which role they want to take on. Role and responsibility. And by doing so, they can also decide what they want to learn, because different competences, different skills, different methods and tools are related to these roles in the projects. And that's how students can really make their own decisions and create their individual learning journey throughout the study program. And that's what we're doing in 3 different fields: in software engineering, in interaction design, and in product management. And because what most of the partners we were talking to in the founding phase told us was that today's employees need to be able to work in teams. That's what we are forcing our students to do from day one. So from day one, they are part of a team, and they have to find out how to work together as a team. Supported by our professors who are mentors to the teams and individual students, but basically our students are part of a team that creates a digital product throughout the whole study program. And everything they learn related to this experience within the project that has, as a project, a relation towards the outside world, to partners, to someone who actually has a problem that this product addresses. And just another aspect of the concept, to give students a guideline for what they should be learning without taking away the initiative, we created a competence framework. And this framework is combining the different competences of all 3 study programs. And students can look at this competence framework, can look at their individual competence profile and ask themselves, where am I today? Which competences on which proficiency level do I have today? Where do I want to be 2, 3 years from now when I graduate? And then decide which projects and roles to take on in order to learn a specific or improve a specific competence. That's, in a nutshell, the learning concept we've come up with. We try to avoid grades up until the last semester, because in the end, if you give out a bachelor degree, there has to be a grade on it. But for the first 5 semesters out of a 6-semester program, we try to take away the focus of our students from the grades and let them focus on their learning experience without asking, is this relevant for the test, and with which grade will I be passing the test, and is this something that impacts my chances as a future employee? So I've brought a lot of questions. We started 8 weeks ago here in Berlin with 88 students, and so this experience is very new and fresh and still exciting. And I'm also excited to sit here with Ben from Minerva, because as I told him before, Minerva was a great inspiration to us when we were founding and coming up and creating the concept that code is today. So, as I said, very happy to be here with you today.
Thanks so much. So let me provide you a little bit of context on Minerva, I guess why we do what we do and what it is that we do. I'll probably start a little bit more philosophical. So Minerva is an American university, and that is worth mentioning because the United States has kind of a unique view of what higher education should be. And it's actually unique in the modern age, but it was modeled after an ancient philosophy. The United States and the founding fathers of the United States fashioned themselves after the ideal or idealized version of the Roman Republic of ancient times. And the concept in the Roman Republic was revolutionary at the time, which was that governance would be done by representatives of the citizenry from among the citizenry. And this was a radical idea. It was a radical idea because up until that point, and frankly, after the Roman Republic, even in some cases during the Roman Republic, after the Roman Republic really fell and the Roman Empire came in its place, who ruled the people were the offspring of the previous people who ruled the people, or the people who killed those individuals and took over violently. And so, and in general, the role of someone in society was determined at birth, right? If you were born to the blacksmith, you will be the blacksmith in the future. If you were born to a doctor, you will be a doctor. If you were born to the king, you will eventually be the king or the queen. And so that world was, in the time of the Revolutionary War in the United States, was the world that existed. I mean, the entire world was effectively some form of dynastic rule. And what was unique in the United States when it rebelled against this dynastic formula is that the institutions in these, and at that point, colonies, weren't very well established. In fact, if you look at the number of universities or colleges, institutions of higher learning, before the beginnings of the ideals of the Founding Fathers came about, which was roughly in the 1740s, you could count them on effectively one or two hands. They were almost non-existent. And so as the Founding Fathers started to think about what should institutions of higher education do, what should they provide, they thought about this idea of providing practical knowledge. That's what Benjamin Franklin called it. Thomas Jefferson called it useful knowledge. And the idea between practical and useful knowledge was that it wasn't teaching a trade. It wasn't about teaching something narrow. It was about teaching broad skills that could be applied to anything that may confront you in the future. Now, this was a radical idea. But at the time, the Founding Fathers said that in order for a democracy or a republic, as the United States was, to work, you actually have to have this at the center of your educational system. Because if you don't, then what will happen is that dynastic rule will be a given. Effectively, you won't be able to choose among your citizenry. You have to have a broadly educated citizenry such that you can move somebody from being a blacksmith or a farmer or a doctor to being a representative or a senator or a president. And they went about creating this system of liberal arts colleges and universities. And over time, that system evolved, and I would say devolved, to effectively go away from those initial ideas, and far more likely going to some degraded version of non-American universities, right? And I say degraded in the sense that they didn't spend as much time on subject, for example, as German universities do, but instead spent less time on that and then did a smattering of other things. And years ago, and when I started working on Minerva, in fact, even before that, when I was an undergraduate and thought about how to reform my university, I thought that we needed to get back to those original ideas. How do you create a curriculum and around it an institution that would actually focus first and foremost on these practical knowledge, on these skills that you can apply more broadly? And this is the core of what Minerva does. We, in fact, spend our first year teaching students 100 different component parts, habits of mind and foundational concepts, that together make 4 broad capacities: how to think critically, how to think creatively or problem solve, how to think about effective interactions, both interpersonal and cross-systemic, and how to do effective communications. And these 4 broad capacities are, in fact, what most universities claim they teach their students. But third-party research shows that they don't. Because you can't actually teach these transferable skills if you teach them within a subject. And so we've created an institution that over the past 3 years has done exactly that. And the demand for what it is that we've done has been pretty shocking, even to me as a founder. So as an example, our 3rd class that started this September, we received more applicants than Dartmouth, which is a 250-year-old Ivy League university, or MIT. And that's unexpected. These applications came from 179 countries, and for the 3rd year in a row, Minerva is the most selective university in the United States. In fact, it's the most selective university in the history of the United States. And our results and outcomes are by far the most effective in the United States. We achieve educational outcomes in 1 year that no university in the United States has ever been able to demonstrate that they can do across 4 years. Right? And the way we do that is simply by creating a curriculum and then supported by a pedagogy and a technology to enable us to create these highly immersive classes in this structured curriculum that then enable students after their first year to choose what area they want to study, and eventually in their fourth year to have a fully personalized education. So anyway, that's our quick overview. So we thought we would engage in questions rather than lecturing at you. As Manuel said, lectures are not very effective. You'll certainly not retain most of what we've talked about. But we'd love to hear what you'd like to hear about. Your thoughts.
I will just bring the microphone for you.
Bring a microphone.
Hello, I'm your colleague from Russia. I'm a head of Russian university. It is open for people of different ages. And the question is, my concern, my everyday concern is the difference between knowing fundamentals and choosing the low-hanging fruits. And I suppose what we are doing together, you in Minerva, you in Germany, and I'm in Russia, we are giving people a low-hanging fruit because we give them practice without a very long way. We came together when we were the university students, when we spent a lot of hours studying a lot of sciences, and that's why we've got a very good base for our choice. But when we do our new universities, we do not give them fundamentals. Do you think this is a good way to do?
Well, I actually disagree with, I think fundamentals are very important, and we wind up giving our students a lot of fundamentals. Everything I described in our first year is fundamental. It's we use the term foundational concepts. And these are concepts that are generative, which means that other things are built upon them.
1 year. 1 year.
Our first year, right? And then in the second and third years, they take advanced courses in subject matter. And if they don't have the fundamentals, they can't pass the second or third year. So those are actually very important. And so the study is of what we do doesn't shortchange any of the rigor of the subject matter. It just gives you a tool set that is that you can apply in these more advanced areas. And so we don't believe that you have to sacrifice expertise to be able to actually have generalizable tools. We think that that's a false trade-off. Right? And of course, we have the luxury in the United States of having a 4-year degree, right? Whereas in many other countries, if you have a 3-year degree, it becomes a little bit harder to fit that in, time-wise. Right?
In our case, it's a little bit different because we are, as I said before, we are waiting for the students to have a question. And then it's up to our professors, and that's what the challenge for them, to find the right way to respond to this question. What they're not supposed to do is just give the student an answer. So student comes with a problem that he or she faced in the project, gets to the professor in the guild meeting, presents the problem, professor says, here's your solution, student applies the solution and hasn't learned a lot. That's basically what you're saying. And if you do this over and over again, you gain a superfluous knowledge, but you never dive deep into concepts and methods and foundational knowledge. So the challenge for our professors is to present the student, take the question and this learning impulse and present the student with a learning opportunity. Not saying, here's your solution, but saying, look at this concept, look at this text, look at this approach, and try to understand it, because it will help you to not just answer this problem or solve this problem you're having right now, but to solve a lot of similar problems you will be facing in the future if you've understood the concept once. And the interesting thing is that the motivation to dive deep into concepts and theories and methods is much higher if you at the same time have something you can apply it to. Because otherwise you have to believe your teacher who always tells you, yes, this will be relevant in the future sometime, but that's not really good motivation to learn something. So we're not forcing our students, but we are encouraging them to take a concrete problem and use it as a trigger to dive deep into theories and concepts.
So the role of the professor is to be a tutor
Exactly.
for students,
Yeah.
and the course he can take anywhere. For instance, in internet, if
Yeah.
you want to deep dive.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, I still have a mic while it's passing. How do you convince or demonstrate to authorities or accreditation agencies that you are still a university and you are still teaching and I mean you fitting into the round holes?
In Germany, we have a very elaborate system of evaluation and assessments and accreditation. So where we are right now as an institution, we've passed like a concept, proof of concept phase with the Council of Science and Humanities in Germany. And by taking this positive evaluation of our concept, the state of Berlin granted us the state accreditation. That's where we are right now. What we're still facing is a program accreditation. So our 3 bachelor programs will have to be accredited by an accreditation agency here in Germany. And that's where we already started having exactly this discussion. Where do we make a difference if we compare ourselves with just training programs, with coding boot camps or something else? Where's the academic approach? Where's the scientific thinking? And there are a lot of aspects where we can show this. The first thing is that we want our students, encourage our students to always go deep into fundamental concepts and theories. That's the one thing. The second thing is we also created a program, what we call Science, Technology and Society program. And this is where all students, no matter in which program they're enrolled, are taking at least one class a semester. And this is all about learning how to think critically, how to think and scientifically, how to read and write, and how to come up with creative problem-solving strategies. And it's all about discussing the relationship actually between science, technology, and society. So what impact does technology have on our future society, specific technologies and use cases. But in the end, this is just the topic. What they're learning, the students, is actually how to scientifically solve a problem or actually just apply scientific thinking to come up with an argument or with a solution for something. That's where we try to make this academic world actually approachable for our students.
And for us, the accreditation system in the United States is interesting in the sense that it has a set of criteria you have to follow, but once you follow those criteria, which I refer to as the container level, within the container you have enormous freedom. And so on the surface, Minerva looks just like any other accredited university. It's 120 credit hours to graduate, there's a major, there's electives, there's general education, it's 4 years, 2 semesters a year, there's a PhD, a small number of students per class, there's seat time, so everything, there are measured learning objectives, etc. And so everything on the surface is exactly the same. It's just that we, within that container, change the substance so everything we do is effective. And in fact, we just did our mid-term report. Accreditation in the United States gets renewed every 7 to 10 years, and halfway through you have to do a report. The regional accreditor, which accredits every university in California, Hawaii, and Guam, this is our region, so Stanford, Caltech, Berkeley, etc. And they asked if they could use our midterm report as a model to show every other university in the region what an accrediting report should look like. And so in many ways, we we have surpassed by far the accreditation requirements, and we've taken to heart many of the things that the accreditors has been urging universities to do, but they have not done. So we have really not found it to be particularly difficult.
One aspect that's quite similar to what you've just described is in Germany we've had this Bologna reform some years ago, and the basic idea was to get study programs in universities to become more outcome oriented, to look at learning outcomes and not at the input, not at the hours a student spends in class, but what he's actually learning. We haven't really realized this idea by how our bachelor and master programs are set up right now, but that's exactly what we are doing. We are really focusing on learning outcomes. So for us, it doesn't matter where or when a student learns something. It's important that we can measure that he actually learned it. And so in a way, we are, maybe can be quite a role model for what was actually the goal of this reform that hasn't been that hasn't realized yet.
I don't know, how does it work? Yeah, sorry. I'm from a business college in Copenhagen. We're more or less doing the same thing as you are doing at Code University, or what you call Code?
Yeah.
Code. Just a comment. Our students, they hate not to have evaluations. So they're all the time sort of asking, where am I? How am I doing? Can I get a grade?
Yeah.
No, you can't. So my first question, two questions. One is, how are you planning on giving feedback on where are you? And my second question is, you say you're letting students study by their curiosity, but I'm assuming you will have a curriculum. You base your program on some kind of curriculum, sort of saying, these are the learning goals of this program. How will you make sure they reach all those learning goals? Because if they're driven by curiosity, then I'm curious to hear, what will you do if they, after 3.5 years, only have been curious within a corner of your curriculum? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But maybe I'll start with the second question that relates to this competence framework I was briefly talking about. What we've done is we've described the competences we see related to the 3-study program, and for each study program there are core competences. And within these core competences you have to have a certain proficiency level in order to be able to finish your study program. So it's basically something, if you see someone with a bachelor degree in software engineering, that's what you expect him or her to be able to do, to know, to have in terms of knowledge and competence. Other than that, our students are free to pursue other competences and engage even in competences that are related to the other study programs. So someone in software engineering could also be saying, I think it would be useful for me to learn a little bit more about interaction design. So he or she can focus on a competence related to interaction design by picking the role in the next project accordingly. And that's also how we give feedback to our students. Our students have their individual competence profile. So from day one, related to the competence framework. So from day one, they go through an assessment process, and in the end, we give them this profile and say, this is where we see you today in terms of competences and proficiency levels. And that's also how we measure learning outcomes from semester to semester, and how we define the goals for the different study programs. You can, I think and I hope that our students will have very individual competence profiles at the end, but as I said, with these core competences, this is something everyone has to have in order to be able to finish a certain study program.
Will you use the individual plans then at the end, at the exam? I'm assuming you will assess them at some point after the end of the program.
At the end of each semester, there is an assessment. So they get, at the end of each semester, they get an updated competence profile where they see their progress. And then you will grade them at the end of the full program, right? Yeah, but only related to the final project and the bachelor thesis. That's where they get an actual grade. So the only grade they're given. Yeah. And one small thing, in addition to that, every student has a personal mentor from the lecturer or the professor's team who guides him or her through the whole study program. And the most important part is that once in the semester, at the end of the semester, they sit together and have a look at the competence profile, at the individual profile at that time. And so student and professor can discuss, where am I today, where do I want to be? And that's where the professors can also push students out of their comfort zone, saying, okay, you've been concentrating on things you're already good at. I think it would be really helpful for you to look at something else, address other competences. That's how we try to motivate students to look out, think outside the framework of their specific competences they already have.
Yeah, so what I'm wondering, did you think about how companies that are eventually going to hire your graduates, they don't really have any comparison because they don't get grades. So if you have students that go to regular universities where they work with grades, then they can ask you as a graduate, like, what are your grades? And then they can compare that and decide if that's good enough for them or not. Did you think about how that will fit if your students don't really get graded, how companies will perceive that then?
Yeah. Interesting question. We had a lot of discussions about that. There are two things to that. First, we started with 8 corporate partners who all basically agreed that they would hire our students without looking at the grade. And that's where we had a lot of discussions with potential employers, and we asked them exactly that. What would you look at? And basically what they were saying is, this idea that a bachelor degree and a grade gives me the opportunity to compare students is just not working. Because if I see a degree from a university I don't know, and it has a 2.3, I have no way of finding out whether this is a good grade or not, because there is no comparison. At some universities, at some professors, this could be a really good grade. At others, it's a really bad grade. So what we're trying to do is we come up with a different way for our students to show what they actually can do and what competences they have, so they can present this competence profile. And they also can present the portfolio of projects and products they've been working on, and it's much more useful information for a future employer than just looking at the degree.
We, by the way, have a similar approach, but we still use grades. Right? I think the fundamental problem of grades is they're completely and utterly meaningless, exactly for that reason. What is an A? What is a B? Nobody knows, right? It's all dependent on the professor. It all depends on what the professor deems is appropriate and what isn't. It's absurd. Whereas if you measure competencies, you have to use rubrics, you have to figure out what level of mastery you have, etc. But then what we do, because the world is used to seeing grades, again, for us this is a container. So we never rebel against containers. We give the container meaning, right? And so we actually have a clickable transcript where at the very high level you'll see somebody gets A minus B, etc. But then you can double click and understand, what does an A mean at Minerva? Right? You have a certain level of mastery of a certain number of foundational concepts, a certain amount of transfer, right? And you can go down and actually drill down into it. And then you can actually get a profile of how well does the student think critically? In what elements has he mastered? In what elements is he struggling? Right? In what elements is he fine? Right? And then you can actually go even further and have a connection and say, show me every single time that this student used Bayesian statistics. And you can see an entire 4-year portfolio of them using Bayesian statistics in class talking. You can see them in Bayesian statistics in their project work, etc. Now, a student would most likely not release this transcript to most people, but the student themselves can go back and see their history, and everything they've done at Minerva is recorded and stored. And so they can then pick out from their portfolio and say, wow, I did a great job in this debate. I'm going to show that to an employer, right? So again, the substance is what matters. But when it comes to the interface to the external world, we want to be understandable, right? So we translate substance to style.
Thank you. I'm coming from the policy-making side, and I like what you're saying because I think that's very important to consider the learning outcomes. My question of my challenge has always been, on one side, when you move into learning outcomes, then why do you still have to put too much emphasis on accreditation when we definitely want to see more flexibility coming into education? I think what you've been discussing here is really flexibility, no matter where you teach from, if it's a workplace or a classroom, but these are the learning outcomes that you're looking for. So why do you have to have the container for accreditation in this case? And then on one side. The second, and this is a debate going on around the African continent, because there are a lot of reforms going on in education. We're expanding basic education, and we are challenged with the quality aspect of it. We're addressing the accessibility, but quality become an issue. How do you define it in this context then?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank
Well,
you.
I'll give you my perspective. And,
Please.
the rationale for accreditation is for me relatively simple. If you are not accredited, you are doing a disservice to your students, right? Why? Maybe your student will want to go to graduate school. Maybe your student will want to apply for a job, and the requirement of the job is you have a bachelor's degree, right? If you skip accreditation because it's easier or convenient, what you're doing is you're limiting access and capacity for your students in the future. And so, again, this is why we don't rebel against the containers, right? The world is used to a certain thing. And rather than saying, revolt, down with the system, burn everything, and have the world conform to what I think the world should be, instead, we say the world has certain interfaces, certain inputs and outputs. We are simply going to comply with those things and raise the standards, right? So we work within and this is actually why accreditation for us was so easy, because we started the best university in the world. So it's very hard for an accreditor to come to us and say, oh, you're going to have outcomes that exceed the Ivy League? No, you're not accredited. That's impossible. They're not going to be able to say no. Right? So when you raise standards, it's very easy to go to the authorities and in so many ways dare them not to accept you, right? So that's kind of the key thing. As far as measurement, we really see three types of measurement that are important. So the first one Manuel talked about, which is just you see progress, right? You track, you say, hey, this is what we're going to teach. You start evaluating students right at the beginning, and you see how they progress over 1, 2, 3, 4 years. That is, by definition, a mark of outcomes. The second element, which is important, is you want to have an external third party validate what it is that you measure. Now, they don't have to validate everything, right? But if they validate some of what you're doing, then it will translate that the other stuff, as long as it's valued in the same way, occurs. And we use what is referred to as a collegiate learning assessment in the United States, which measures 4 broad capacities: critical thinking, problem solving, scientific reasoning, and written communications. It's not everything that we teach, but it's certainly a large enough segment such that when the CLA shows that we have outsized gains in all of those areas, which they do, it's easy for us to say, well, now it gives validation to what we measure internally. The third one is we look at actually the real world, per se, right? The working world. And we survey employers of our students, initially in internships, eventually when we have graduates in the real world. And that is perhaps the most dramatic. Despite the fact that the CLA shows that, as I mentioned, after 1 year, our students have accomplished levels of around these 4 capacities that no university has been able to demonstrate after 4 years. So again, dramatic impact in that world. The feedback we get from employers is the same. which is our first year students that have effectively 100% placement rate for anybody who wants to work over the summer. We could find them summer employment in jobs that are traditionally internships that are either not given to undergraduates or given to third-year students. The managers of those students say that 90% of Minerva undergraduates, first-year students in these surveys, outperform their expectations of any undergraduate from any year, mostly third-year students. Right? So if you have 90% of your first years outperforming the top school's third-year students, you're doing something right. Right? And so those are, I think, three very important measures of outcomes.
I mean, we had in the beginning, when we were just starting to create this university, the concept for it, we had a vivid discussion whether or not we wanted to actually become a state-accredited university, or whether we would just wanted to stay outside the system, this highly regulated system. Because there were a lot of future potential employers who said, we don't care if your students have a bachelor degree, as long as they are able to do something we need, as long as they have the competences we're looking for, we will hire them. What made us go into this system and accept all the limitation and all the framework and everything that comes with it was basically two aspects. The first one is it's a kind of this system makes sure that students who trust you as an institution with no track record, don't get fooled, basically. So, and that is a good thing, because when we started and when our first students applied, we had nothing to show for. There were no professors, there was no building, no campus, there were no alumni, nothing. So there's a lot of trust involved, and having the state accreditation is kind of a trust signal in the beginning, so it helped us start. And the second aspect is we wanted to be inside the system in order to show what's possible within the boundaries, within these regulations. And that's where I think we can have a discussion that relates to existing universities, for example, because as long as you stay outside the system, they can just push you aside and say, if we wouldn't have all these regulations, we would also be able to do what you're doing. But now we can say, no, we play by the same rules, and we can show you what's possible. So that's we have no problem with this regulation and this accreditation process, or the container, as you call it. But I like this idea of giving it meaning. And the second thing is this quality discussion is really, really hard, because that's what we're skipping all the time. That's where we should start every discussion with: what is the outcome? What do we actually want to measure? What makes a learning experience successful? And for us, one very interesting aspect of the discussions we had with employers and experts in the beginning was, we were asking them, how does the perfect graduate look like? What should they be knowing, doing, be able, methods, tools, whatever? The basic answer was, actually, we have no idea how the world looks 10 to 15 years from now. So in terms of concrete knowledge, we cannot give you an answer. But what we do know is we need team workers. We need people who are really able to be a productive part of a team, and that therefore you need to have a lot of communication capability, sensibility towards interpersonal communication and everything that's involved in that. They have to be able to creatively solve problems we don't know that will exist in the future. And please let them learn this. And they have to be not just willing, but they have to be excited to learn new things, because they have to keep learning from day to day, from year to year, throughout their whole professional life. And so for us, besides all the factual knowledge and the tools you're learning and the methods you're learning, these are the three most important learning outcomes. And that's what we're focusing on.
Well, we are officially out of time, but we're a small enough group, so we're happy to chat a little bit for a few minutes afterwards. But thank you very much for joining the session. And if you want to chat for a couple minutes afterwards, we'll be here.
Yeah, thank you very much.